Hey guys, tonight we travel across ancient trails under an endless sky, where your boots crunch over frost-bitten grass and the wind hums ancient songs into your ears. You're not a tourist. You're a Mongol mail courier, riding across the thundering veins of the Silk Roads, with the weight of an empire tucked inside your saddlebag and the scent of dried goat meat curling from your pouch. And yes, you're probably not going to survive this trip without at least one extremely suspicious snack that might rearrange your insides. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You nudge your shaggy, loyal horse forward, bundled in layers of rough wool and leather. Behind you lies Karakorum, the beating heart of the Mongol Empire. It's early morning. Frost still sparkles across the open steppes like spilled diamonds, and your breath steams into the air as you chew a piece of jerky with all the joy of gnawing a boot heel. This, of course, is the breakfast of champions. Salted mutton dried so tough it could deflect arrows, and a wooden flask of arag, also known as fermented mare's milk. The taste, like sour yogurt that's decided to throw a small party in your sinuses. You grimace, swallow, and whisper a prayer to Genghis Khan's spirit that this day won't end in dysentery. Still, you're not complaining much. You are, after all, one of the Yam system's elite messengers, galloping with urgency from one end of the empire to another. The Mongol Postal Relay Network, faster than anything else in the 13th century, is a web of stations where fresh horses, hot food, and occasionally strange soups await. You're expected to cover hundreds of miles with terrifying speed. And if your cargo, sealed documents, imperial orders, a lock of silk, or sometimes a pouch of emeralds, doesn't arrive in one piece, well, let's just say the Mongols weren't famous for gentle performance reviews. The sun peaks over the horizon now, golden light washing the steppes in that cinematic glow you wish came with some actual warmth. You reach into your pouch for a small bundle of crushed millet and dried meat powder wrapped in cloth, borsuk, trail food for the dangerously undercaffeinated. You chew and swallow mechanically, pretending it's a croissant. Spoiler, it's not. There's something hauntingly beautiful about this emptiness. No towns, no traffic, just grass, wind, and the occasional distant gallop of another rider, a flicker on the horizon. Mongol couriers like you traveled light and lived rough. You've trained yourself to nap on horseback, balance a cup of arag with your knees, and tell edible moss from the explosive kind. Historians still argue whether this entire system was purely pragmatic or if it had a ritual function. Did the Mongols see their mail routes as sacred lines across the land? You don't know. You just know your thighs are numb and your breakfast has migrated south in a suspiciously liquid state. Mid-morning hits. You dismount by a lonely tree that might be the only vertical thing for 50 miles. Your horse munches a patch of frozen grass while you stretch your back, remove your gauntlets, and fish around for a final morning snack, a slab of dried cheese called karut. It's basically dairy's attempt at becoming granite. You suck on it like candy, jaw aching. Some say it was invented just to train warriors' teeth to become weapons. A hawk circles above. A few goats bleat distantly, probably mocking you. The wind changes. You sigh and climb back into the saddle. Next stop is a Gur outpost near the Kenai Mountains. If your directions are right and your horse doesn't get spooked by the smell of roasted marmot. That happened once. We don't talk about it. The road hums under your horse's hooves. You pass a patch of old battlefield, rusting arrowheads, broken spear shafts sticking out of the dirt like accusing fingers. History doesn't just whisper out here. It shouts, sings, and occasionally punches you in the gut. Lunchtime arrives, and you settle beside a river frozen at the edges. You pull out your last food ration, another hunk of mutton, this one wrapped in birch bark and sprinkled with dried wild onions. It's cold, greasy, and surprisingly tasty if you close your eyes and pretend it's lamb gyros. You eat with your gloves on, chewing slowly, watching frost form on your eyelashes. You're used to monotony. Mongol mailmen often ate the same meals over and over. Preserved meats, milk products, grainy lumps of something that used to be soup. But once in a while, something unusual pops up. One time, an old woman at a relay station handed you a still-warm pancake stuffed with pine nuts and dried apple slices. You cried a little, quietly, like a warrior. As twilight descends, and your shadow stretches long across the icy ground, you see the low silhouette of a relay station, a warmger, smoke curling from its top like a dream. The first leg of your journey ends here, and your stomach, despite all its grumbling protests, knows one thing for sure. This is only the beginning. You wake up before dawn, stiff and sore from sleeping curled up near the fire pit in the center of the GR. The embers glow faintly under the ashes, and your breath still rises in silver clouds. One of the station guards snores in the corner, arms wrapped around his saddle. Your horse is outside, hopefully not eating someone else's reins again. You stretch slowly, bones cracking like old timber, and feel the steady ache of another long ride ahead. You light a dried dung chip and slide it into the fire pit, coaxing it back to life. A pot of barley porridge sits on the edge of the flame, left there by a kind soul, or possibly the last courier, who just gave up and ran off to open a tea shop. You grab your food pouch from your saddlebag and pull out breakfast, a handful of arul, the iconic dried curd of the Mongol steppes. It's a snack, a survival tool, and possibly a blunt weapon. Arul is made from curdled milk, pressed, shaped, and sun-dried until it hardens into little rocks of dairy doom. It's crumbly, sour, and gets lodged in your molars like it's trying to claim territory. You suck on one while waiting for the porridge to warm. It tastes like a goat yelled at a lemon. Outside, the wind howls low and steady, sand whispering against the felt walls of the GR. The Gobi Desert is ahead, and the Gobi does not care about your comfort or your digestive tract. The Gobi wants to challenge you, dehydrate you, and sandblast your nostrils while you politely gnaw fermented cheese. Stepping outside, you pull your fur-lined hood tight and squint into the sunrise. The sand already moves in thin sheets across the road, like the earth is exhaling. The station master, an elderly man with a beard like a broken broom, nods at you and offers a small, linen-wrapped packet. You unwrap it carefully and smile. More arul. Naturally, you climb into the saddle. Your horse, bless its shaggy soul, huffs like it's already over this day. You whisper promises of carrots and back scratches, neither of which you're authorized to provide, and ride out. Within hours, the green steppe vanishes behind you, replaced by dry earth and rolling dunes. The Gobi is not your usual cinematic desert. It's cold in the mornings, flat in many places, and full of rocks sharp enough to give your horse a bad attitude. But it has its own kind of eerie beauty. Wind carves strange shapes into the hills. Ghost towns of bones lie scattered along the path. A faded wheel here, a broken flask there, evidence of travelers who didn't quite finish their journeys. You reach into your pouch again and pull out something crunchy. No, not a bug. It's a preserved piece of milk skin, also known as urum. It's made by boiling milk and skimming the fatty film off the top, drying it like a cheese leather. If that sounds gross, it is. But it's protein, and it doesn't spoil. You tear off a strip and try not to taste it. Just chew. You've learned that trick. There are no trees, no rivers, no chirping birds, just the sound of wind and hooves. You eat slowly as you ride, wondering, again, what it might be like to work in a bakery. With muffins. That don't smell like horse. Historians still debate whether Mongol riders relied entirely on what they carried or hunted along the way. You've personally seen both. Sometimes you chase down a rabbit, skin it, roast it over a fire, and eat it like you're king of the wild. Other times, you chew hardened cheese while eyeing your saddle suspiciously, wondering if boiled leather really is a thing. By midday, the sun is merciless, and your lips are dry enough to crack. You wrap your scarf over your face and ride into a shallow valley where a well-known oasis once stood, at least according to the vague map you've got. You find nothing but a patch of dead grass and some suspicious lizards. The thirst creeps in, and you try not to panic. Fortunately, you're carrying a skin of sour yogurt drink, similar to kefir, made at the last station. It smells like socks, but save your life. You sip slowly, wincing, then snack on a ball of sun-dried meat fat mixed with crushed millet and herbs. It's oddly delicious. Or maybe your hunger has rewired your taste buds to accept anything not made of cheese. Suddenly, the wind kicks up hard. Sand sweeps across your vision, stinging your cheeks. You squint and pull your scarf tighter. The horizon disappears. It's a mini sandstorm, the kind that can confuse even the best riders. You dismount and lead your horse on foot, eyes down, boots crunching on grit. You stumble across a patch of abandoned carts, half buried in sand, broken wheels, a shattered drum. Among the ruins, you spot a rusted cooking pan and, oddly, a spoon shaped like a falcon. You pocket it. That's lunch theater right there. After the storm settles, you remount and continue. The terrain shifts again, rolling dunes like ocean waves, then flat plains of cracked earth. The sun begins to fall, shadows growing long, and you feel your stomach twist again. One last treat remains in your bag. A little honey biscuit wrapped in wax silk, a gift from a Chinese diplomat who once passed through your station. You saved it for a day like this. You sit on a rock, legs shaking from the ride, and let that sweetness melt on your tongue. Beeswax, almond flour, honey, and something you can't quite place. Maybe citrus, maybe magic. For a moment, you forget the smell of your horse, the ache in your back, the taste of sand. Just for a moment, the stars come out one by one. The Gobi sky is so wide it makes you feel microscopic. There are no lights, no towns, no voices, just wind, hooves, and your breath. You set up a tiny fire using dried dung again, glamorous, roast a sliver of jerky, and try to get comfortable under a wool blanket. That's when the howling starts. Not wind. Wolves. Far off, but close enough to make your stomach do a little backflip. You press your horse closer and mutter bedtime threats of the darkness. Mongol riders rarely worried about wolves. They feared spirits more. It's said some parts of the Gobi are haunted by whispers of dead riders, still galloping with messages never delivered. You fall asleep, chewing a final piece of a roll, its chalky sourness grounding you in the moment. Your dreams swirl with strange smells, dusty bread, and a dumpling that tries to sell you insurance. Somewhere far ahead lies your next stop. But for now, under this endless sky, stomach rumbling, mouth dry, and saddle muscles officially destroyed, you sleep. Because tomorrow is another day, and possibly another 100 miles of dairy-based survival. The first thing you notice when you wake up isn't the cold or the soreness. It's that your mouth still tastes like dried curd. Somehow, in your sleep, a stray chunk of a rule had lodged itself behind a molar and now greets you like an old enemy. You sit up slowly, stretch your arms, and take in the stillness. The Gobi isn't loud, but silence is weight. Like it's listening. Your horse is still alive and hasn't run off, which you take as a win. After all, horses in the Yam system are well trained, but even they can get fed up with long routes and questionable catering. You dust off your coat, sip the last of your salty milk tea, and pack up camp. A new day means new terrain, new challenges, and, most excitingly, new flavors of questionable food. Today's route hugs the edge of the desert and skirts the rocky steppes where snow still lingers in shaded crags. You adjust your pack and mount up. The wind is calmer today, and for once, you can actually hear yourself chew. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out your next meal. A brick of pemmican-like dried meat and fat, the Mongol version of a protein bar. It's chewy, oily, and vaguely reminiscent of a yak that once tried to eat your boot. Still, it keeps you going. You ride in silence for miles, letting the rhythm of hoofbeats lull you into a half-trance. Then you see smoke curling on the horizon. Not a fire, not danger. A way station. These stations, known as Ortu, are scattered across the empire, spaced roughly every 25 to 30 miles, depending on terrain. They're your lifeline. Each offers a place to rest, eat, swap your exhausted horse for a fresh one, and maybe, if you're lucky, avoid dying of thirst. This one is a humble cluster of jars and a low wooden stable. Children run barefoot in the dirt, chasing a puppy the size of a melon. A woman in a red deal waves you in and offers a steaming bowl of something suspiciously lumpy. You take it, because that's the rule. Eat first, question later. The bowl contains bortsog, fried dough twists that look like crispy braids and taste like unsweetened cookies if cookies were cooked in sheep fat. You dip them in a bowl of arak, the famous fermented mare's milk. It fizzes on your tongue and tastes like liquid anxiety. Still, this is a delicacy across the steppes. You chew slowly, eyes watering just a little, and pretend you're at a 5-star restaurant. May I see the menu? You mumble to your saddlebag. As you eat, one of the elders joins you. His beard is long, his boots cracked, and his smile crooked. He sets down a basket of dried roots and tubers, forage from the sparse scrublands nearby. He offers you one, dried wild onion. You chew on it carefully, savoring the earthy bitterness. This might not be the most glamorous lunch you've had, but it's definitely memorable. Historians still argue whether the yam's food logistics were centralized or mostly local. Did Kublai Khan's administrators issue supply orders from Karakoram? Or did local clans stock their own stations using whatever they had on hand? Given the onion you're gnawing right now, you're betting on the second option. You rest briefly while your new horse is prepared. It's younger, faster, and definitely judging your breath. You refill your water skin with tea-infused water, a trick the station master recommends to keep it tasting fresh longer. He also hands you a folded packet of dried fruit strips made from sea buckthorn berries. Tart, bright orange, and full of vitamin C, they're a traveler's treat. Back on the road, the landscape shifts again. Now a gravelly slope with low bushes and the occasional startled marmot. You pass a small pile of rocks with a blue scarf tied around a stick. It's an ovu, a sacred offering mound. You dismount, circle it 3 times clockwise, and place a pebble on top. Superstition? Maybe. But no one rides the step without respecting its spirits. For lunch, you stop by a stony creek trickling through the rocks. You light a tiny fire and heat up a small pouch of dried dumplings, known as banch. They've been pre-cooked, then dried until they could probably survive re-entry from space. You add water, wait, and bite in. It's like soup inside a pillow. A slightly gritty, goat-scented pillow. Still, after a morning of sand and wind, it feels like luxury. A caravan passes by, going in the opposite direction. Silk merchants, their camels groaning under loads of fabric, porcelain, and spices. One of the traders nods at you and tosses a small item into your lap. A spiced fig wrapped in rice paper. A gift, or maybe just leftover stock he didn't want to carry. Either way, you thank him with a wave and tuck it into your pouch for later. You ride into the afternoon sun, the air thinning as you ascend into hillier terrain. Your horse slows, breath puffing harder now. The wind picks up again. Not as harsh, but persistent, like it's trying to whisper secrets in a language made entirely of dust. You spot a worn path leading off to the side. A shortcut? A trap? Or perhaps a trail to another station nestled in a hidden gorge. You risk it, trusting your gut and your horse's instinct. After a rugged hour of riding, you find it. A tiny cave-like rest post, built into the side of a rock face. It's barely big enough to stand in, but it's stocked with emergency supplies. Dried cheese, salted meat, a jar of pickled turnips, and an oilskin packet of brick tea, tightly compressed for long travel. You settle in, start a small fire, and boil some water. The tea turns the water dark and smoky. You sip and let the warmth seep into your limbs. Dinner is humble. Rehydrated meat, crushed dumpling shards, and a generous helping of pickled radish, sharp enough to jolt your taste buds back to life. Night falls quietly. You wrap yourself in furs and lie back, staring at a sliver of moon through the stone opening. Your stomach is full. Not fancy full, but just enough full. And that's something. As you drift off, you remember a rumor you heard at the last station, that somewhere in the mountains is a rest stop that serves stuffed quail eggs and honey dates, left behind by a Persian envoy years ago. Maybe it's myth. Maybe it's real. Either way, it's something to dream about. Right alongside fermented cheese, sweaty tea, and that fig still hiding in your pouch like a secret. Tomorrow's route will take you past ancient ruins where ghost stories are as common as grass. But tonight, in this lonely rock hut, belly content and wind less cruel, you sleep. You wake to the sound of wind brushing over stone, gentle, not angry. The little cave shelter you found last night has done its job. You stretch slowly, muscles stiff but grateful, and roll onto your side. The fire's gone out, but the coals still glow faintly like the last heartbeat of a dragon. You poke one with a stick. It doesn't bite. Good sign. You chew the last bit of dried meat from your pouch, and then remember the spice figure, the one wrapped like treasure, tucked into the seam of your saddlebag. You unwrap it carefully, half expecting it to burst into song. It doesn't. But when you bite in, The sweetness melts through the morning bitterness in your mouth. A perfect sugar bomb before a long ride. You're almost emotional. You saddle up and take one last look back at the hidden shelter. If you didn't know where it was, you'd never find it again. That's the way with many yam way stations. Some are grand, others disguised in plain sight. The idea was never comfort. It was efficiency. The Mongol Empire moved like lightning, and its couriers had to keep up. Even if that meant their bed was a dirt hole and their breakfast was whatever didn't crawl away first. As the path leads upward, the air gets cooler. You pull your coat tighter and glance at the horizon. Clouds are massing there, grumpy and full of judgment. The kind of sky that says, "Oh, you thought this would be easy? But first, one more climb." You push your horse up the narrow ridge trail until, finally, the land opens wide into a high plateau. Here, the landscape changes again. Gone are the dry scrublands and sand-swept hills. In their place, alpine grasses, wind-stunted pines, and the occasional glimmer of ice under rock. You stop for a drink at a glacial stream, cold enough to bite your fingertips. It tastes pure, like snow melted straight from the sky, which, technically it probably is. You splash some on your face, freezing, and immediately regret it. You dry off with your sleeve, muttering something very un-Kublai Khan under your breath. Lunchtime sneaks up on you, and you've earned something hot. You dismount and find shelter behind a cluster of rocks. Time to see what's left in the food satchel. You find a pouch of sui van, or at least what once was sui van. Now it's just dried noodles and tough beef flakes. You add water, set it over a fire, and wait as the broth begins to hiss. While it cooks, you snack on a handful of roasted barley kernels, salty and nutty. They crunch like gravel, but they're strangely addictive. Mongol riders often carried these for their long hauls. They don't spoil easily, they're full of energy, and they make a nice distraction when you've run out of things to talk to your horse about. By the time your stew is ready, the wind is picking up again, swirling the scent of beef and garlic in every direction. You eat fast, steam fogging your face. It's not a 5-course meal, but it's warm, and it fills the corners of your stomach that dried curd never quite reaches. As you pack up, something catches your eye in the distance. A watchtower ruin, half sunk into a hillside. The Mongols were notorious for their network of signal stations, fires, and outposts. Some historians argue whether these towers doubled as emergency food drops. Others say they were just for communications. Either way, you're curious. You veer off the main path and approach. The tower is barely more than rubble, but inside you find a stone basin, long dried, perhaps once used to store grain or water. You also find a small wooden chest, empty except for some brittle rice husks and a single jade spoon. Someone had fancy taste. You don't linger. The wind is getting stronger, and the sky's moody again. Time to find a night's stop. After 2 more hours of riding, your knees aching and your horse grumpy, you finally spot a larger way station tucked into a valley. This one's sturdier, built with stone walls and a slate roof. Fancy. The smell hits you before the sight. Something sizzling, smoky, and promising. Inside, a family tends to a communal pot hanging over a fire. They welcome you with tired eyes and warm smiles, and you're offered to share their cork hog, Mongol barbecue. The real deal. It's lamb chunks, potatoes, and carrots, all cooked inside a pressure-sealed pot with heated stones. The kind you can't touch unless you're looking to lose a fingerprint. The meat is tender, smoky, and rich. The fat melts on your tongue. You nearly weep. They hand you a hot stone from the pot and motion for you to rub it between your palms. It's not just for fun. It's a traditional way to soothe aches and stiffness. It works. Your hands feel better. Your soul, too. While you eat, the eldest man tells you a story. Something about Genghis Khan's messengers outrunning hawks, riding all night with letters sewn into their coats, surviving on little more than curds, meat, and raw determination. You nod, imagining a fleet of dusty couriers racing across the land, ducking storms and arrows and indigestion. As the fire dims, you're offered a small bowl of sweet curdled milk with berries, a rare treat. It's thick, tangy, and surprisingly luxurious. Mongols didn't waste food, but they certainly knew how to reward a long journey. Later, curled in a corner on a pile of furs, your belly full and your boots drying near the fire, You think about how this massive postal system held an empire together. Letters, orders, treaties, threats, all of them passed through hands like yours. Hands still sticky from lamb grease. Some scholars still debate how consistent the food offerings were across the yam. Did every way station serve meat? Were there vegetarian options for visiting monks? Were figs a fluke or a feature? Records are patchy, often contradictory. But one thing's for sure. The couriers ate what they were given, and they kept writing. You drift off to sleep with the taste of barbecue, still lingering in dreams of ancient messengers galloping under a silver moon. The morning begins with the scent of smoke still lingering in your clothes, and a quiet rustle of movement as other riders prepare to leave. The way station stirs like a lazy cat, one eye open, not quite ready to move, but aware of the day ahead. You slip out quietly, nodding thanks to the family, and step into the frosted dawn. Your horse exhales a cloud into the air as you tighten the saddle. A light frost glistens on the grass, crunching beneath your boots. The Mongol couriers of centuries past didn't have the luxury of slow starts. You feel a flicker of sympathy, then remember you're about to spend hours on horseback, eating like them, thinking like them, and possibly ending the day smelling like their laundry basket. Sympathy quickly gives way to shared suffering. The trail today curves along a mountain's edge, high above a river that slices through rock like a knife. Below, birds soar and dart. Up here, you're chasing history. Literally. Some yam couriers rode over 200 kilometers a day. By horse. Mind you, not turbocharged moped. The secret? Relay riding. You didn't keep one horse. You swapped them out every 25 to 40 kilometers at each or two or station. Fresh horse, fresh legs, slightly less cranky rider. You approach one of these stations by late morning. It's more rugged than the last. A small stone hut and a fenced corral. The keeper, a broad woman in a fur cap, sizes you up like she's evaluating a turnip for market. With a grunt, she leads out a new horse. It's sleek, black, and visibly annoyed by your existence. You take that as a good sign. Angry horses run faster. Before you leave, she hands you a small pouch. No explanation, just a knowing look. Inside, a handful of arag-dipped fry dough bits. They taste faintly sour, sweet, and somewhere between delicious and what did I just put in my mouth? Mongol couriers didn't fuss over picky eating. Food was fuel. If it didn't bite back, it went in. You're galloping within minutes. The wind claws at your sleeves. The terrain flattens and speeds you up, and your thoughts drift, naturally, to how this empire once stretched across 9,000 kilometers. And it all held together, in part, because of people like you. Mailmen with guts, buns of steel, and questionable diets. As you ride, you spot other travelers. A merchant caravan trudging along with mules. A lone monk sketching symbols in the dirt with a stick. A group of young riders practicing mounted archery near a distant ridge. Their arrows fly like whispers. You wave. They nod. Everyone here is passing through. Noon breaks gently, with a rare pause. You find a shaded dip in the land and dismount. Time for a break and lunch. Today's prize, a flaky roll of stuffed dumpling bread, pressed flat for easy carrying. You bite in and discover onion, mutton, and a punch of garlic so strong you could scare off ghosts. It's amazing. Next to is a little pouch of fermented carrot jam, which you're pretty sure wasn't originally Mongol, but tastes so oddly good, you decide not to overthink it. Historians still argue whether food items like this were local adaptations added in later centuries, or if Mongol way stations had more culinary variety than we've assumed. The truth is muddy, but delicious. You rest briefly, leaning back on your pack, listening to the wind hum through the grass. Mongol couriers didn't have podcasts. This was it. Wind. Hoofbeats. The occasional scream when a horse decided to veer off a cliff. You try not to think about that part. Back on the trail, the path veers into the lowlands, flatter, greener, warmer. Here, the Yamway stations were more frequent, and sometimes, gasp, comfortable, especially along the silk roads where trade was richest. As you approach your next stop, you realize it's one of those. It has an actual gate, a real roof, even a stable boy who doesn't look like he's planning to rob you in your sleep. Inside, things feel different. There's laughter, pots clinking, and even the smell of cinnamon. a spice traded across thousands of kilometers. You're directed to a long table, where other riders are already gathered around a central dish. Dinner tonight is something called mantis soup, brothy, with soft doughy dumplings bobbing like lazy fish. It's comforting, savory, and, miracle of miracles, it has a pinch of spice. One of the other riders, a wiry man with a bright red scarf, passes you a small bottle. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs and says, "Apricot wine." You sip. It burns, but in a fruity way. Couriers were sometimes given small flasks for warmth, especially in colder regions. Not enough to get sloshed, but just enough to dull the ache in your spine and convince you that yes, riding tomorrow is a great idea. As dinner winds down, talk shifts to legend. Someone brings up the tale of a courier who once rode through a sandstorm, blindfolded, guided only by the sound of a ringing bell. Someone else laughs and claims their ancestor once delivered a message so fast it outran a wildfire. Historians might roll their eyes at these tall tales, but they do agree on this. The yam wasn't just a mail system. It was a lifeline, a nervous system running across Asia's spine. Empires rose and fell, but the couriers endured, on bread, milk, meat, and the stubborn belief that getting the message through mattered more than comfort, sleep, or dignity. Tonight, you sleep indoors, tucked under a real blanket. There's a little oil lamp flickering beside you, and the distant sound of someone playing a two-string Morin cour, a horsehead fiddle. The tune is slow, plaintive, and eerily beautiful. You don't know the song, but it sounds like the wind riding a horse. You close your eyes and let it carry you. You set off at dawn from the warm glow of the previous station, your spirit buoyed by the remnants of last night's comforting fare. Today's leg of the journey promises not only a change in scenery, but also flavors as exotic as the Silk Road itself. As you ride along a ribbon of sunlit road stretching between rugged outcrops and whispering dunes, you recall the day's plan: to trade a carefully wrapped bundle of dried fish for a fresh cache of Samarkand plums, delicacies that seem to carry the very essence of far-off lands. The air today is a mix of spices carried on a gentle breeze, a promise of markets bustling in the distance. Your horse trots steadily beneath you, its breath visible in the cool morning air as you leave behind the last station's welcoming murmur. The dried fish, stacked neatly in a leather pouch, is your bargaining chip. In your world, you learn that provisions are as varied as the lands you traverse, and even a humble courier can discover that trade is an art form. You remember that the Mongol Empire prized not only speed, but also a network of culinary exchange, a fact celebrated in many a historical scroll. The fish, salted and sun-dried until its flesh has a firmness that almost defies gravity, has a flavor both briny and rugged, a taste that sets your mind adrift to the coastal settlements where it might have first been prepared. As the day matures, you approach a small caravanserai marked by vivid banners fluttering in the warm, midday sun. The building is an architectural mosaic, its walls inlaid with traces of spiced silk, exotic fabrics imported from the distant lands where merchants and travelers once bartered not only goods but also stories. You dismount and secure your horse beside a weathered post, running your fingers over the worn leather of your saddle before heading inside. The air in the caravanserai hums with low conversation and the tang of incense, mingling seamlessly with the scent of grilled meat and roasted spices. Here, you meet a merchant from Samarkand, his eyes twinkling with both shrewdness and the delight of travel. He carries with him a basket of plump, ruby-colored plums, their skins glistening as if touched by honey. These aren't just any fruits. They are said to be the finest of their kind, renowned along the Silk Road for their perfect balance between tart and sweet. You know that these plums are a treat worth more than just a cursory glance. They promise a burst of flavor that can lift the spirit after the long hours of the road. With practiced ease, you barter your dried fish for a generous handful of Samarkand plums. The transaction is swift, conducted in a language of nods and carefully measured smiles, a trade ritual as old as the roads themselves. You stash the plums in a small cloth bag, ensuring that no bruise mars their delicate skin, and take a moment to appreciate how the journey has transformed even the simplest provisions into treasures. The merchant, half in jest, tells you that these plums are so good they might inspire a sonnet. But you chuckle and assure him that your only recitation today will be one of gratitude and a silent prayer to the gods of the road. Before departing, you receive one more unexpected gift. A local spice merchant, noticing your interest in his vibrant collection of ground cumin, cardamom, and saffron, insists on offering you a small vial of liquid honey imbued with an infusion of rare spices. For your dispatch scroll, he says with a wink, implying that even official documents might taste better if carried with a dash of sweetness. The notion amuses you. Sticky honey on an imperial dispatch, an idea both absurd and oddly fitting in this vast web of exchanges. With the spice merchant's gift tucked securely away, you prepare for the next leg of your ride. You rejoin your horse, feeling the smooth heft of the newly acquired plums in your bag, and head out along the sun-dappled path once more. The road ahead takes you along a gentle slope where the earth is dappled with the remnants of ancient silk trade routes. The wind carries hints of spiced aromas that mingle with the natural musk of the countryside, creating a symphony of scents that are at once both foreign and familiar. As you ride, your mind wanders to the intricacies of communication in the Mongol Empire. You recall that the Yam network was not merely a means to deliver messages, but a lifeline linking vast cultures and economies. A single dispatch, marked with official insignia and sealed with wax, could be the bearer of orders that altered the course of battles or the fate of cities. Today, your own dispatch scroll, a piece of parchment rolled tight and secured with a simple yet unyielding knot, awaits a final flourish. Stopping by a small natural spring, you remove the scroll from its protective sheath. With the precision born of countless routines, you uncork the vial of spiced honey and, with careful deliberation, drizzle a thin, sticky line along the edges of the parchment. The honey glistens in the sunlight, catching the dust motes in the air. It is a small luxury, a personal signature of the journey's blend of duty and delight. As the sticky sweetness dries, you reflect on the peculiar ritual that has become part of your routine. It's a subtle reminder that even in the midst of relentless travel, with its challenges and hardships, there is beauty and art. The honey, much like the exchange of goods along these ancient routes, is a testament to human ingenuity and the capacity to find joy in the smallest moments. In that fleeting instant, you become both courier and curator, preserving not just imperial messages, but also the cultural mosaic that defines this vast, interconnected world. Historians still argue whether the true significance of the Yam system lay in its military efficiency or its cultural contributions. For you, the answer is embodied in every traded plum, every fragrant vial of honey, and every exquisitely spiced silk draped along the station walls. Reinvigorated by the sensory explosion of flavors and the satisfaction of a fair trade, you resume your journey. The afternoon sun is at its peak, bathing everything in a golden hue. You pass other travelers, some moving slowly with their laden carts, others on swift horses like your own, and exchange amiable greetings. A pair of riders share a laugh over a joke about a camel who thought it was a racehorse. You add in a dry quip about how at least a camel never has to worry about a sticky scroll. The landscape begins to undulate gently as you approach the outskirts of a bustling market town. Here, the remnants of ancient caravans mix with the vibrant pulse of contemporary life. Market stalls burst with color, rich fabrics, shimmering spices, and fruits piled high in a riot of hues. The plums you acquired seem almost aglow in this ambience, a small reminder of far-off Samarkand among the local produce. You decide to pause and explore the market, letting the hum of bargaining and the clatter of everyday commerce temporarily lull you out of your routine. Despite the temptation to linger among the wares and conversing locals, you have a mission to complete. The dispatch scroll still calls for its final ritual, a flourish of sweet, sticky honey that binds your official orders with an artisanal signature. In a narrow alley behind one of the stalls, you find a tiny courtyard where you can unfurl your scroll under the shade of an ancient apricot tree. The tree's gnarled branches, heavy with fragrant blossoms, lend a serene backdrop to your impromptu ceremony. You take out your small vial once more, watching as the honey now hardened into a glossy seal reminds you that this act was both practical and poetic. As you rewrap the scroll and secure it in its case, your thoughts drift to the larger picture. Every barter and every sweet ingredient, every exotic plum and artfully drizzled honey, marks your role in a tapestry of history that spans continents. It's easy to dismiss these details as mere minutiae in the grand narrative of empires and conquest, but you know that these small exchanges hold immense power. The power to soothe a weary spirit, to alter the flavor of a message, or to bridge gaps between distant cultures. You flash a smile at the thought of future couriers finding your honey-sealed scroll, pondering the curious blend of bureaucracy and culinary creativity. With your mission complete, you mount your horse and leave the town behind. The road beckons once again, stretching outward into the shimmering heat of late afternoon. Your legs carry you forward, the weight of the scroll a comforting reminder of purpose. Each stroke of the reins, each rhythmical clip-clop of hooves on stony ground, seems to echo with the laughter of traders and the soft murmur of markets long past. A brief encounter with a group of nomads, resilient, weather-beaten travelers whose eyes sparkle with the freedom of the open steppe, offers you a parting blessing in exchange for a shared morsel of dried fish. Their humor is wry as they jest that every courier should have a sticky story to tell, and you join in the laughter, grateful for these brief moments of camaraderie. As dusk falls, painting the sky in hues of pink and burnt orange, you find shelter in a modest encampment near a meandering river. Here, you settle down with a humble meal of flatbread and a stew that tastes faintly of the spice merchant's honey, a coincidence that draws a wry smile from you. Outside your tent, the sound of water mingles with the distant, rhythmic beating of drums, a reminder that even the most arduous journeys can hold moments of unexpected celebration. Before you close your eyes, you retrieve the silk fabric you traded for, its soft texture carrying the history of trade and the whispers of countless travelers. Running your hand over the fabric, you remember that this road is not just about delivering messages. It's also about the stories, the trades, and the small rituals that stitch together life along the Silk Road. With the sticky sweetness of honey still vivid on your scroll and the taste of Samarkand plums lingering on your tongue, you prepare for another night under the starry sky. A night where ancient history and modern journeys unite in a quiet, unforgettable harmony. As the first light of dawn cracks open the eastern sky, you stir beneath a makeshift canopy woven from reeds and discarded silks. The scent of last night's honey-tinged stew still clings to your fingers and clothing. It has been days since you departed from Karakoram, and the journey is no longer just a job. It has become a rhythm, a breathing, pulsing connection to the vast land beneath your horse's hooves. Each hoofbeat is a syllable in a language older than any empire, and this morning, the road feels different. There is an echo, a sense of approaching something final. Today, you ride toward the empire's edge, the last yam station before your dispatch reaches its intended hands. This will be your final exchange, the moment when your scroll, sealed with ritual sweetness, changes hands and continues on its path, eventually arriving in the grasp of a noble, a general, or perhaps even the Khan's advisor. Yet even in this knowledge, a strange melancholy clings to your mind. What becomes of a courier once the message is gone? The air is crisp. A gentle mist hovers over the plains, and dew glistens on the saddle leather. You mount your faithful horse, its muscles taut with anticipation, and set off at a brisk canter. The early morning is quiet, save for the occasional rustle of brush or the distant call of a hawk. The scenery changes subtly. The land flattens, the foliage thins, and a golden hue tints the earth. Less fertile, more wind-scoured. It is as if nature itself is telling you this place is a border, the far edge of something grand. Midway through the journey, you come across a lone figure, an elder with a weathered face sitting by a low fire, a kettle steaming on the rocks. He beckons silently. You dismount, not out of obligation, but curiosity. The old man offers no name. Instead, he pours a small cup of bitter tea and hands it to you without a word. The drink is earthy and biting. No honey here, but you accept it, grateful. As you sip, the elder speaks at last, softly and slowly. You carry something beyond a scroll, he murmurs. You carry memory. A road remembers those who honor it. His words settle into your mind like sediment in a stream. You nod respectfully, feeling that strange sensation again, the merging of duty and identity. You're not merely a messenger. You are the breath of the empire, keeping its heart beating across mountains, deserts, and time. After exchanging a few more quiet words and a pouch of dried fruit, you remount. Your horse seems to sense the journey's arc nearing its apex and quickens its pace without encouragement. The road stretches like a string pulled taut between two mighty hands. As you ride, you recall tales passed between couriers about the yam stations that flickered to life at night, like lanterns for wandering spirits. About messengers who vanished into snowstorms or reappeared after years with wild eyes and stranger stories. You never believed all of them. But today, with the horizon shimmering under the high sun, anything seems possible. Approaching the last station, the signs grow more deliberate. Stone markers etched with swirling Mongol scripts, flags fluttering in the wind, a rusted gong half buried in sand. The station is quiet, tucked between two shallow hills, built from brick and sturdy wood, with a watchtower standing solemnly above. You slow your approach, rein in your horse, and survey the place that marks your endpoint. An attendant, young and freshly scrubbed, greets you with a ceremonial nod. She takes your horse to water and guides you into the station's shaded center. Inside, an official with an angular face and keen eyes sits behind a wide table. His fingers drum against its surface with impatient precision. "You've ridden far," he says, his tone clipped but not unkind. "May I see the dispatch?" You unsling the scroll with a practiced flourish, the honey seal still intact. When he takes it, he pauses, inspecting the sticky edge. "You're the one with the spiced honey signature. We've heard of this." A smirk plays at the corner of his mouth. Makes the messages harder to forge. Smells better, too. He doesn't open it. His task is simply to confirm delivery, then prepare it for its final leg. Still, he bows his head slightly before placing it into a compartmentalized case. There is reverence in the act. For a moment, you both simply sit there in silence, honoring the journey's completion. "Would you like to stay the night?" he offers. "There's food and rest before you return." You nod, not because of exhaustion, though it lingers in your bones, but because you want to savor this place. You want to linger just a little longer at the edge of duty. That evening, you sit outside the station beside a low fire, joined by several other couriers who have either arrived or are preparing to depart. A woman from a northern tundra tells tales of wolves who run beside riders under moonlight. A boy barely older than 15 shares how he once crossed a frozen river by crawling on his belly with a scroll clenched between his teeth. Laughter and silence pass around the fire in equal measure, and your heart feels full. These are your people, not just messengers, but keepers of connection. You realize then that it wasn't the scroll that held magic, but the journey it demanded. You retrieve the last of your Samarkand plums from your bag and share them with the group. One of the older men raises an eyebrow. "Sweet and sour," he mutters as he chews, like the empire itself. You wake early the next morning to the sound of horses being saddled and station gongs echoing across the plain. Your own return journey will begin soon. There is no official dispatch this time. No scroll bound in silk or sealed with honey. You ride lighter, freer, the weight now in your memory, not your satchel. As you ride back westward, the landscape seems changed. The hills look softer, the grass taller, the clouds closer. You pass familiar landmarks, streams where you washed, trees under which you slept, and yet they no longer seem like just places. They are your waypoints, your silent companions. And as you pass each one, you murmur quiet thanks. Back in Karakoram, you return to the Yam headquarters. The clerk recognizes you and hands you a fresh set of scrolls. New orders, new destinations. You take them, but you hesitate, not out of reluctance, but reflection. For the first time, you realize that you are not just following a route. You are carving it, one hoofbeat at a time. You spend one more night in the capital before setting off again. This time, you carry not just messages, but also stories. The tale of the spiced honey scroll, the Samarkand plum that split in your hand like a gem, the elder's tea, and the courier's fire. You become a storyteller, passing these tales to fellow riders, station attendants, and the occasional curious child. And in time, you become a legend, not in the grand halls of rulers or the gilded pages of history books, but in the quiet spaces of the yam, the stations, the fires, the galloping echoes. They say your scrolls always carried scent, that your words moved faster than the wind, that wherever you rode, the empire breathed easier. But the truth is simpler. You were a courier, a thread in a tapestry stretching from the Pacific to the Caspian, and through salt, spice, ink, and hoof, you wove stories into the empire's very soul. And even now, long after your last ride, long after your name faded like the ink of ancient scrolls, the road remembers. It always remembers. Years have passed. The roads are quieter now. The gongs at the yam stations ring less often. Empires have shifted, borders redrawn. The breathless pulse of messengers racing from one corner of the Mongol dominion to another has slowed. But some things never disappear completely, like the trace of honey sealed into a scrap of silk, or the memory of a rider whose scrolls always arrived before the storm. In a remote town nestled between sand-washed hills and almond orchards, a small museum stands. It's built from reclaimed station wood, old Mongol bricks reassembled into a quiet sanctuary. Inside, artifacts whisper stories, cracked stirrups, faded maps, leather satchels stained with time, and a wax seal still sticky with the ghost of spiced honey. Tourists rarely come here. Scholars do. Writers do. And sometimes, children with wild imaginations, their eyes wide as they gaze upon the relics of the past. In a glass case near the back, there lies a dispatch. The scroll is brittle, its silk faded to the color of old snow. But the seal remains intact, thick, amber, fragrant even after centuries. If one leans close enough, they claim to catch a scent: plum, ginger, cinnamon, and something indescribably warm. Some say it smells like courage. Others say it smells like home. Beside the scroll is a small plaque. It reads, "Anonymous Courier, Rider of the Great Yam, believed to have served during the reign of Ogidi Khan, distinguished for unique scroll sealing techniques and long-distance relay runs. Identity unknown. Legacy eternal. But this is only part of the truth. The real story lives in memories, scattered like seeds across the land. In a crumbling hilltop village in northern Mongolia, an old woman still sings lullabies passed down from her grandfather, who swore he met a courier with hands calloused from reins and scrolls. The rider sealed his messages with honey, he would say, and his stories made firelight flicker. In a merchant caravan on the Silk Road's modern shadow, a man tells tales of a legendary messenger who once outran a thunderstorm. He adds, with a grin, that the rider left behind a trail of hoof prints that never faded. In a scrollkeeper's notes buried in a university archive in Samarkand, there's a line scrawled in faded ink. Message delivered 3 days ahead of forecast. Rider signed with honey. Smelled like saffron. And in Karakoram, where the winds still carry dust and dreams, a group of young reenactors ride from station to station each spring, dressed in period garb, scrolls strapped to their backs, galloping over hills with the fire of history in their hearts. They call it the Golden Relay, a tribute to those forgotten couriers who once bound the world with hoofbeats and hope. Every year, before the ride begins, the lead rider dips a small brush into a jar of spiced honey and seals their scroll with care. They never write their name. They never need to. Far from the reenactments and glass cases, in a forgotten corner of an abandoned yam station, a letter lies tucked between stone and earth. The ink is faded, the parchment cracked, but the words remain legible. Perhaps a last dispatch, or a personal note never sent. It reads, "To the next rider, if you find this, know that I was once like you. I carried words that were not mine, but became part of me. I crossed deserts, rivers, forests, and fears. I seal my messages with honey, so they would arrive not just intact, but remembered. If your hands are tired, rest. If your spirit is fading, listen to the wind. It still sings with the songs of riders past. We were never just couriers. We were the soul's messengers. Ride well. Ride true. Let your path taste of honey and ink. Anonymous. Who wrote it? No one knows. Some say it was your final message. Others believe it was penned by a different writer, inspired by the legend you left behind. Does it matter? What matters is this: the roads still remember. In the twilight years of the Mongol Empire, as the yam system slowly unraveled, many thought the spirit of the couriers would vanish too. But legends are stubborn things. They hide in the quiet places, the half-remembered songs, the scent of honey on old parchment. In a Beijing tea house, an elderly poet recites stanzas about a lone rider who brought peace between warring factions through nothing more than a timely dispatch and a tale shared beside a fire. His audience listens, spellbound. When asked where he heard the story, the poet smiles. "My grandmother," he says. "She claimed her great-uncle once rode with a honey seal courier." In Istanbul, inside a university library's restricted section, a historian uncovers a fragment of a 13th century letter praising a courier whose scrolls carried not just words, but warmth. The letter bears a wax stain, fragrant, even now. In the hearts of storytellers from Kazakhstan to Iran, China to Hungary, the figure returns again and again. Not a conqueror, not a prince, but a writer. Always writing, always delivering. So what happened to you? No one knows for certain. There are stories, of course. Some say you retired and lived by a river, tending to bees and making your own honey, which you sold in small clay pots with scrolls tucked inside. Others claim you vanished into the mountains and became a guide, showing lost travelers the hidden paths once used by messengers. A few whisper that you died on the road, scrolls still clutched in hand, and that the horses in the steppes still avoid that place, bowing their heads in silent respect. But perhaps you simply rode one day and kept going, not for duty, not for orders, but for the joy of the wind against your face, the rhythm of hooves, and the ever-changing horizon. You became part of the road, a ghost woven into dust and thunder, a whisper in the tall grass, a scent in the autumn breeze. In the present day, a child sits beside a campfire under a Mongolian sky. The stars are sharp, endless. The child's grandfather, weathered and kind-eyed, leans in to tell a story. "Once, there was a courier," he begins. "They weren't rich. They weren't powerful. But they carried the words of kings and the hopes of villages. Their scrolls were sealed with honey, so sweet, even the horses ran faster to deliver them." The child listens, wide-eyed, wrapped in the warmth of the fire in the story. And somewhere, far beyond the campfire, beyond the steppe and stars, a rider gallops still. The wind brushes your cheek like a whispered memory as you urge your horse onward, hooves pounding against the packed sand of the Taklamakan fringe. This stretch is cruel. The landscape ripples with dunes like frozen waves, golden by day, silver at night, and totally silent except for the rasp of wind carving patterns into the earth. Your saddle creaks. The weight of the scroll strapped to your back is feather-light in reality, but in your mind, it weighs as much as a kingdom. You're carrying a list of border realignments, stamped by a Mongol governor, meant for a military outpost tucked somewhere in the folds of western Gansu. You'll need to cross some of the driest terrain in the empire to get there. Lucky for you, this isn't your first desert. And lucky for your belly, you've packed accordingly. Tonight's meal is an odd mix: a pouch of crushed walnuts, dried sheep curd, and, you'll never guess, a twist of licorice root from a Sogdian merchant. The curd? Sour, tangy, practically bites your tongue. But it keeps, doesn't spoil, and it's rich with salt and fat, the kind your body craves in dry country. Mongol couriers were smart like that. You might miss fresh melons and warm dumplings, but there's a strange comfort in these chalky little white cubes. A little goes a long way. Your licorice root is another story. You gnaw it like a toothpick, savoring the faint sweetness as sand creeps into your boots. One ancient courier claimed licorice could pull water from stone. He might have been exaggerating, but modern scientists say it does help the body retain moisture. Historians still argue whether this trick was Mongol innovation or borrowed from the Chinese apothecaries of Dunhuang. Doesn't matter to you. You're chewing, not debating. This stretch of the Silk Roads has its own rhythm, its own ghosts. You pass a cluster of weather-worn stupas, half buried in the sand, and briefly wonder how many scrolls passed this way before yours. Trade goods certainly did. Bolts of silk, glass beads from Venice, elephant ivory, Buddhist texts. But messages? They moved differently. Lighter, quieter, more dangerous. Sometimes. You slow your horse to a walk. A thin wind whistles through your saddlebag. Something smells faintly of apricot. Ah, right, your last snack stop. Apricots dried in the sun, picked up from a trader near Tor Pond. Sticky. Sweet. You imagine a Mongol courier centuries ago, slipping one into his pouch. Maybe he traded it for a story. Maybe he just liked the way it tasted after a day of galloping. Some riders swore by dried meat. Others clung to wild berries or salted fish. There was one famous case of a messenger who insisted on carrying tiny candied violets, allegedly for spiritual balance. Modern scholars doubt the story, but the violet smell scroll fragment found in western Tibet suggests someone, somewhere, definitely had a floral habit. At your next rest stop, a creaky old yam station half swallowed by sand. You find a stash left behind by a previous rider. Inside a stone pot wrapped in horsehide is, what else? Dried cheese. This version is tougher, almost rubbery, flecked with herbs. Probably Turkic. You take a bite. It fights back, but it's edible. There's also a folded note. It reads, "Don't trust the spring. Too shallow. Camel fell in." Well then, you tip your water skin. Still half full. Good thing you're not traveling with a camel. You sit for a while, leaning against a cracked pillar that once held a torch for nighttime arrivals. The stars are out now, razor sharp. Your horse grazes on what little scrub it can find, snorting softly at the sand. You break out a final ration. Roasted millet cakes, crushed flat and dry as papyrus. They don't look like much, but they'll keep your legs moving tomorrow. You smile to yourself, remembering a story. Once, in the high passes near the Tian Shan range, a courier ran out of food completely. Starving and stranded, he bribed a marmot with a stolen dumpling and shared the rest with a Tibetan monk in exchange for a shortcut trail. The scroll made it. The rider didn't, but the marmot? It shows up in medieval paintings wearing a red collar. Historians still argue whether that marmot was real or just a metaphor for good luck. Back on the road, you start humming. Not a tune exactly, more like a breath turned musical. It helps distract you from the hunger gnawing at your ribs. You'll eat better at the next station. Maybe they'll have hot broth. Maybe dumplings, if you're lucky. Occasionally, the yams are stocked with luxuries, thanks to gifts from traveling envoys or over-prepared nobles trying to impress each other. One station even had fruit preserves from Crimea, thick, ruby-colored, spooned into wooden bowls. You remember slurping a plum jam, so sweet you nearly wept. Of course, the next day you fell off your horse from sugar cramps. Lesson learned. The best food you ever had on the road, though? An onion pancake made by a Kazakh widow who insisted you looked like her grandson. She wrapped it in cloth, kissed your forehead, and said, "For luck, don't forget the smell of real things." You haven't. The memory clings tighter than your saddle straps. As dawn breaks, you pass a caravan camp. A cluster of bundled camels, wool tents, sleepy dogs with curled tails, and the smell of lentils thick in the morning air. A boy offers you a bowl in exchange for a song. You croak out a verse from the courier's hymn, something about wind, bone, and trust, and the lentils are yours. They taste like cinnamon, garlic, and someone else's childhood. You finish every drop. You ask what else they're cooking. The boy shrugs. Porridge, goat bits, some pine nuts. He gives you a fistful of dates and says, "Don't let the scrolls get hungry," then disappears into the tents. You ride again, over dry hills, through patches of cracked clay that crunch beneath your horse's steps like old bones. Your shadow stretches ahead like a second rider. You pass a half-buried milestone. Carved into it is a symbol, 2 arrows crossing. The old Mongol courier mark for change direction or die trying. Cheery. Your stomach growls again. You reach for another walnut. It's cracked, sweet, and warm from your hip pouch. Not bad. Not bad at all. By midday, you see the yam station, a squat stone building with smoke rising from its vent. When you arrive, the station master greets you with a grin and a wooden bowl. Inside, boiled dumplings swimming in peppered broth. "You're early," he says. "Smell like licorice and trouble." You slurp. He laughs. He offers you dried apricots, milk tea, and a slab of barley cake soaked in sheep fat. You eat until your belly forgets the road. It's the closest thing to comfort you've known this week. And maybe that's the real reason riders remember their meals. Not for flavor, but for feeling. The way a strange herb tasted like home. or how a burnt crust reminded you that you were still alive. You pack a few leftovers and prepare to ride again. As you mount, the station master says, "You couriers are strange. Always hungry, always moving." You wink. The scrolls don't feed themselves. Then you're off again, scrolls tucked safe, belly full, wind behind you. The road stretches forward, hungry for your stories. And you? You taste like apricot, dust, and destiny. The road ahead stretches endlessly, a ribbon of cracked earth, and swirling dust beneath a sky the color of faded denim. You trudge forward, feeling the sun like a slow burn on your neck. The only relief the occasional flutter of wind whispering through the tall grasses along the way. You're halfway between two distant way stations, a stretch where neither camel nor horse dares to dawdle. Today's meal isn't going to win any gourmet awards. You pull from your pack a ball of dried curd cheese, hard as a rock, crumbly as old parchment, and some salted fish preserved in yak fat. The fish smells like the sea's long-lost memory, a pungent ghost of brine and smoke that makes you wrinkle your nose. The curd is the opposite, a faint tang like the breath of old earth. They're simple, durable, and more than enough to keep you going. You unwrap the cheese slowly, savoring the bite. It's a taste your body knows from years of riding the Silk Roads, a taste that sticks with you like the dust on your boots. It's not just food. It's survival, tradition, history, chewed and swallowed by thousands before you, from the steppes to the mountains. It's the quiet anthem of 1,000 couriers, the gritty soundtrack of a mail route carved through empires. Historians still argue whether the Mongols learned their dried foods mostly from Turkic nomads or developed these methods independently. But either way, the preservation techniques were perfected for one reason. You can't stop for a feast when a message is urgent. Your food must endure the long ride, just like you. As you chew, you glance over your shoulder, eyes catching the mirage of a distant caravan shimmering like a heat-induced apparition. Caravans are slow, methodical beasts, unlike your swift rider's pace. They carry silk, spices, jade, and sometimes entire fortunes wrapped in cloth and dreams. But you carry secrets, scrolls bearing imperial orders, coded messages, and whispers that could tip the scales of kingdoms. Your mouth tastes the salty fish again, and you remember an odd tale told by an old courier in the Altai Mountains. He claimed that some Mongol riders used to carry small jars of fermented mare's milk, a drink called arag. Not just a drink, but to soothe wounds. He swore the milk's natural fermentation killed germs better than any salve. Scientists today are fascinated by these claims, but historians still debate whether such practices were widespread or the product of oral folklore embellished over generations. You reach for your water skin, careful not to spill a single drop. Water is precious, a treasure almost as valuable as your scrolls. You pause to drink and watch the clouds drift like cotton ghosts across the endless sky. You feel a pang of homesickness. Maybe it's the taste of the curd or the bite of the wind, but your thoughts wander to warm hearths and the smell of fresh bread. The sun climbs higher, and the heat becomes a living thing, wrapping around you like a thick blanket you can't shake off. The only sound is the rhythmic clop of your horse's hooves, steady and relentless. You chew another piece of the curd, remembering the way it was made. Fresh sheep's milk curdled and pressed, dried in the sun until it hardened into a shelf-stable ration. It's no wonder Mongol riders carried it. They needed food that wouldn't spoil on the longest stretches. Your thoughts drift again, landing on an unexpected detail you picked up from a Silk Road herbalist scroll. Apparently, Mongol mailmen sometimes rub their bodies with a paste made of crushed black cumin seeds mixed with animal fat. This concoction repelled insects and kept the skin supple despite the harsh sun and wind. Sounds like a spa treatment with a bite, right? Historians still argue whether this practice was common among the couriers or limited to high-ranking riders. You rub your forearm, imagining the herbalist's pungent recipe must have smelled like a walking spice market. Still, any trick to stay comfortable was worth a try on this endless ride. Your horse's breath huffs out in steamy clouds despite the heat. The animal has been your constant companion, your shield against the barren wilderness. You pat its neck, murmuring a quiet thanks for carrying you this far. Ahead, the landscape shifts. The dusty plains give way to rocky outcroppings, jagged like the teeth of the earth. You adjust your grip on the reins. The scroll feels heavier now, not because of weight, but because of what it carries. Orders that could change borders or start wars. You remind yourself why you carry it. Why you push past hunger, exhaustion, and the endless monotony of the road. A sudden noise draws your attention. The rattling of a wooden box from your saddlebag. Inside is a small stash of dried fruits, plums, apricots, and a few rare raisins traded from the Persian traders. They're sweet, almost candy-like, a brief reprieve from the salty, sour diet you've been eating. You bite into a plum, and the sticky juice dribbles down your chin. You wipe it off quickly, hoping no one saw your moment of childish delight. Dried fruit was a prized treat among couriers, often traded at way stations or gifted by grateful merchants. Some riders even kept small jars of honey harvested from wild mountain bees, a sticky sweet that could revive spirits during the most grueling parts of the journey. Historians still debate how widespread the use of such luxuries was among lower-ranking couriers. But one thing's clear. A sweet bite could mean the difference between despair and hope on these lonely roads. The midday sun blazes down, and you begin to feel the familiar fog of fatigue. You dismount at a small outpost nestled among scrub brush, where a few other riders rest. You exchange greetings, a brief nod, a grunt, the universal language of exhaustion and camaraderie. Here, you find a communal pot of hot tea, a blend of dried herbs and milk, fragrant and soothing. You sip slowly, feeling warmth seep into your bones. It's not just refreshment, it's ritual. Tea was the lifeblood of Silk Road couriers, warming cold nights and soothing tired throats. The Mongols had adopted this custom from the Chinese, adding their own twist by whipping in cream or salt. You sit quietly, listening to the chatter around you. Stories of sandstorms, lost horses, and strange travelers. One rider claims he once carried a scroll wrapped in birch bark that contained a secret poem, a puzzle to be solved by the emperor's court. Historians still argue whether such poetic intrigue was common or just romantic legend. You chuckle softly. You've got secrets enough without riddles. As afternoon drifts toward evening, you prepare to move on. Your pack feels lighter now, your stomach a little less empty. You tuck the last of your dried curds away and mount your horse. The sun dips low, painting the sky with strokes of orange and violet. Shadows lengthen, and the air cools. You breathe deeply, savoring the moment when the world seems to hold its breath, waiting for night. You think about the next stretch of road, the mountains looming ahead, the dangers they hold, the food you'll carry then, the tastes and smells that will accompany you. The Silk Roads are a living story, a never-ending journey written in dust and flavor. And you're part of it. The road ahead narrows as you approach the foothills of the great Tian Shan Mountains, the jagged peaks cutting sharp silhouettes against a fading amber sky. You adjust your pack and tighten your cloak against the chill that creeps up your spine. The air here is different, crisper, thinner, and laced with a faint scent of pine and wild herbs you don't recognize but somehow find comforting. You breathe it in deeply, a fleeting comfort on a journey that never truly lets you rest. Your horse's hooves crunch on a path littered with brittle twigs and small stones, the sound steady and reassuring in the quiet of early evening. You pause briefly, squinting at the horizon where the sun slips behind the mountain range. Twilight is a fragile thing here, a brief brush between the harsh daylight and the cold night to come. It's time to think about what you'll eat before the darkness swallows the world. You reach into your saddlebag and pull out a piece of dried meat. Jerky made from yak, tough but flavorful. It's been cured with salt and spices from far-off lands, a hint of cumin and Sichuan pepper lingering in the fibers. This is no ordinary snack. It's a concentrated source of energy, packed with enough protein to fuel the longest rides and the coldest nights. The jerky cracks as you bite down, the flavor rich and lingering, warming your mouth despite the cooling air. Historians still argue whether Mongol couriers primarily used dried yak meat or if they also incorporated venison and other wild game more extensively. Some suggest that the availability of certain meats varied greatly depending on the season and region, making each rider's diet a patchwork of local resources and traded goods. As you chew thoughtfully, your mind wanders to the logistics of the mail system itself. It's a marvel, really. The network of relay stations and mounted couriers are stretching thousands of miles, connecting the heart of the Mongol Empire to distant capitals, deserts, and ports. You are one small but crucial part of this vast machine, the lifeline that keeps messages flowing faster than any foot soldier could manage. Each station along the route offers more than rest. It provides fresh horses, meals, and often a chance to swap stories with other riders. These stops are bustling hubs of activity, a brief oasis in the relentless landscape. You recall the last station you visited, a modest outpost nestled beside a bubbling stream, where you shared a hearty stew made from barley and mutton with fellow couriers. The stew had been simmering all day, fragrant with wild garlic and mountain herbs, a reminder that even the harshest places hold pockets of warmth and hospitality. Tonight, though, you'll have to make do with your own supplies. Along with the yak jerky, you unwrap a small bundle of dried noodles, a gift from a trader passing through weeks ago. They're brittle and pale, almost translucent, but when soaked briefly in boiling water, they soften into a comforting meal. You imagine the steaming bowl already, with the broth made from the marrow of your last camel's bones, thick and rich, flavored with whatever wild herbs you can find. The noodles remind you of the Chinese influences weaving through the Silk Road's culture, an endless exchange not only of goods but of tastes, ideas, and traditions. Mongol riders often incorporated these culinary gifts, adapting them to their own nomadic ways. Historians still argue how much these influences shape daily life for couriers versus the more traditional steppe foods. You reach a small fire pit ringed with stones, a relic from a previous traveler, maybe a shepherd or another rider who stopped here to rest. You settle down nearby, careful to shield your fire from the growing wind. The crackle of flames offers a hypnotic rhythm, a warm glow that pushes back the shadows. You pull out a small clay pot filled with fermented mare's milk, or arag, which you've carried for days. It's sour and fizzy, with a slightly sharp bite that cleanses your palate and soothes your thirst. You remember hearing tales that some riders used arag not only as a drink, but also as a form of medicine, believed to aid digestion and even fight off infections. Recent studies have found that arag contains beneficial bacteria, making it an ancient probiotic of sorts. Still, historians debate whether its medicinal use was widespread or more the stuff of legend passed down by elders around campfires. As night fully settles, the stars emerge one by one, brilliant pinpricks against the vast dark canvas overhead. You lie back in a bed of soft grass, your belly full of jerky and noodles, your spirit calmed by the warmth of the fire and the vastness above. You're keenly aware of the delicate balance of your life here, between danger and safety, between exhaustion and energy, between the ancient rhythms of the land and the urgent pulse of empire. You think about the stories carried along these roads, not just official dispatches but rumors, secrets, gossip, and legends that weave the human tapestry behind the empire's grand facade. It's said some riders carried coded messages hidden in the patterns of their saddles or in the beads strung on their reins, a primitive form of encryption that confounded enemies. Historians still argue whether such codes were common or more of an elite practice among high-ranking couriers. The cold seeps into your bones as you prepare to rest, but before you close your eyes, you take a final bite of a dried apricot, the sticky sweetness a balm against the harshness of the journey. You remember a story told by a merchant in Samarkand, who swore that the Mongols prized apricots not just for flavor, but for their resilience, just like the riders themselves. Apricots could be dried and stored for months, just as a rider needed to be ready for any storm or setback. You let the taste linger, your thoughts drifting toward home, to the small comforts waiting for you after a long ride. The warmth of a fire, the smell of fresh bread, the sound of a loved one's voice. For now, though, the road is your home, and this patch of earth beneath the stars is your bed. As you close your eyes, the fire's last glow fades, and the night hums a lullaby carried on the wind. You are part of a story that stretches back centuries, written in dust and sweat, in taste and endurance. A story only the mailmen of the Silk Roads could tell. Word count, 1,513. You wake slowly as dawn's pale fingers pry open the sky. The air is still crisp, scented faintly with wild thyme and the earth's cool dampness. Your horse, rested and eager, shifts beside you, its breath steaming in the chilly morning light. You stand, stretch your stiff limbs, and start preparing for another long day on the Silk Roads, where the horizon seems endless and your role, essential but humble, keeps the empire's heart beating. Today's meal is already on your mind, the humble breakfast that fuels a Mongol mailman. You reach for your small pouch, fingers brushing past dried fruit and nuts gathered from a last oasis stop. The dried fruits, plums, apricots, and mulberries, are chewy, sweet little bursts of energy that have traveled nearly as far as you. These fruits not only taste good, but have preserved nutrients and vitamins critical for your stamina. As you pop one into your mouth, you think about the unexpected health wisdom behind such simple fare. Historians still argue whether Mongol riders' diets were primarily survivalist, or if they had access to a more varied, even luxury, array of foods thanks to the empire's extensive trade networks. Some suggest couriers ate mostly what they could carry easily, while others point to accounts of lavish feasts offered to them at stations when traveling through prosperous cities. You take a moment to watch the landscape awaken. The steppe unfolds around you like an endless sea of gold and green, dotted with tents and grazing animals. In the distance, the faint outline of a caravan snakes its way toward a distant market town. It's a reminder that the Silk Roads are not just pathways, but arteries of commerce, culture, and connection. Goods, ideas, and even recipes flow along these routes, shaping the tastes of many lands. Today, you decide to prepare a simple dish you learned from traders in Kashgar, a quick, nourishing millet porridge. Millet, with its small, round grains, is a staple across many cultures here. You measure a handful into your pot and add water, lighting a small fire beneath it. As the grains bubble and swell, a nutty aroma fills the air. You stir in a pinch of salt and a few crushed dried herbs for flavor. This porridge will warm you, fill you, and keep your legs steady on the rocky paths ahead. This small meal reminds you how food was a constant blending of traditions on the Silk Roads. Mongols often adapted ingredients from the lands they conquered or traded with, mixing steppe staples with Chinese, Persian, or Turkic influences. You might find yourself eating noodles one day, fried fish the next, or stews simmered with saffron and dried apricots. Quirky as it sounds, some riders were said to carry crocodile dung as sunscreen during the hottest parts of the journey. While that might raise an eyebrow or two, it's an example of the surprising folk remedies and superstitions that traveled along with the spices and silks. Historians still argue how widespread such practices really were, or if they were the colorful exaggerations of storytellers trying to explain unfamiliar customs. As your porridge thickens, you hear the soft clip-clop of another horse nearby. A fellow rider pulls up, his face weathered but his eyes bright with shared purpose. You exchange nods and share a quick meal, swapping news of the road ahead, weather warnings, bandit activity, and the ever-important condition of the relay stations. These brief moments of camaraderie are precious, a reminder that despite the vastness of the empire, you're never truly alone. Your companion unwraps a small piece of something that looks like cheese but smells sharp and tangy. It's fermented mare's milk cheese, a delicacy among the steppe nomads, known as kurut. Hard and dry, it's a perfect travel snack, long-lasting and packed with nutrients. You take a cautious bite, surprised by the salty tang and crumbly texture. It's a taste that lingers, a little wild and earthy, like the land you ride through. The mail system depends not only on riders, but on an intricate chain of relay stations spaced roughly every 25 to 30 miles, where fresh horses await. These posts are staffed by locals, often families who have tended to the station for generations, forming a quiet but vital community along the route. You think about the lives intertwined with yours in this web of service. Station keepers, blacksmiths, cooks, and guards, all playing their part. At some stations, you're offered a cup of tea made with yak butter and salt, known as pacha. This thick, creamy brew is a staple of Mongol hospitality, providing warmth and calories that feel like a hug after a cold ride. You recall once spilling a cup of it, watching the golden liquid soak into your cloak. A small tragedy in a world where every drop counts. The journey isn't just about physical sustenance. You remember the rhythms of travel, the sound of your horse's hooves, the whisper of the wind through the grass, the quiet crackle of a fire under a sky swollen with stars. These sounds become a meditation, a kind of moving prayer that steadies your heart and mind. You learn to appreciate the silence, the solitude, and the small comforts that keep you going. A peculiar bit of folklore comes to mind. Some writers believe that chewing on certain herbs could sharpen their eyesight or ward off exhaustion. Whether true or not, the idea speaks to the resilience and resourcefulness demanded by this nomadic lifestyle. Historians still argue whether these practices had any real physiological effect, or were more symbolic rituals passed down for morale. You think of the messages you carry, sometimes official decrees from the Khan himself, sometimes personal letters between distant family members, or secret negotiations between emissaries. The weight of these letters is light in your saddlebag, but heavy in your mind. You are a guardian of communication, a living link across a sprawling empire that stretches from the Pacific to the heart of Europe. The risks you face are many: bandits, harsh weather, exhaustion, and the ever-present danger of losing your way. Yet the promise of fresh food, a warm fire, and the steady beat of your horse's gallop keeps you moving forward. You wonder how many riders before you felt this same mix of hope and weariness, strength and vulnerability. As the porridge finishes cooking, you ladle it into your wooden bowl and add a handful of crushed nuts and a drizzle of honey, a rare luxury traded from southern lands. The sweet and nutty flavors blend perfectly, a small celebration amid the monotony of the road. You savor each spoonful slowly, letting the warmth spread through your body, filling you with quiet energy. The Silk Roads are a corridor of contrasts between city and steppe, luxury and survival, tradition and change. Your meals reflect this delicate balance, combining the humble and the exotic in ways that sustain both body and spirit. Before you mount your horse to continue, you pack the remnants of your breakfast carefully, mindful of every crumb. There will be times when you must eat on the run, stealing bites between relays, relying on whatever you can carry. Each meal is a small ritual, a moment of grounding in a life defined by movement. You glance once more at the rising sun, feeling its gentle heat promise a day of steady travel and, perhaps, small discoveries. The road stretches on, winding through landscapes both harsh and beautiful, carrying you forward in the footsteps of countless couriers who made history with every meal, every mile, and every message delivered. The sun has climbed higher now, casting a warm glow over the endless steppe, its golden light shimmering off the distant hills like a promise. You settle into your rhythm, the steady gait of your horse syncing with your own pulse as you continue your journey across the vast expanse. But the road isn't just a path of dirt and stone. It's a living tapestry woven with stories, customs, and unexpected flavors that fill your days and nights. Today, your mind drifts to the curious ways Mongol mailmen like you manage to keep nourished and energized, despite the relentless pace and rugged conditions. As you ride, you reach for your small pack and pull out a piece of bortsog, a kind of fried dough. It's crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside, and surprisingly satisfying when paired with a pinch of salt or a smear of honey from reserves. Bortsog is a staple among the nomadic peoples of the steppe, prized for its portability and long shelf life. Perfect for a courier who might not see a proper meal for hours or even days. You take a bite, savoring the simple pleasure of its warmth and texture. The story of Mongol cuisine is a fascinating mix of necessity and invention. The harsh environment meant that food had to be practical, easy to carry, quick to prepare, and high in calories. But it was also deeply connected to the animals you and your people herded and revered. Horse meat, mutton, and dairy products were the backbone of the diet. Air-dried meats, known as borts, were common, preserved for the long stretches when fresh food was scarce. Historians still argue whether these nomadic diets were supplemented regularly by foraged or traded goods from the bustling Silk Road cities, or whether riders primarily stuck to what the land and their herds could provide. It's likely a little of both, sometimes a tough life, sometimes unexpected luxury. As you chew thoughtfully on the bortsog, you remember a tale your grandfather once told you about a secret ingredient used to keep riders alert: powdered roasted mare's milk mixed with wild herbs. While the exact recipe has been lost to time, it's said this concoction provided a mild stimulant effect, enough to sharpen the senses without disrupting the all-important sleep that awaited after a long day on the saddle. Whether this is fact or folklore, it reflects the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the riders, always looking for an edge. You glance toward a distant caravan winding its way through the dust haze, reminded again of the Silk Road's incredible diversity. Merchants from Persia, China, and India all contribute to the melting pot of cultures, each with their own foods and culinary secrets. Sometimes you trade your dried meats for exotic spices or rare fruits. Other times, you receive a gift of fresh bread or dried noodles from a grateful trader. One quirky story you've heard along the way is that some Mongol riders believed eating a certain type of mushroom could bring visions, possibly spiritual guidance or just hallucinations after a long, hard ride. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or merely the stuff of myth and cautionary tales. As you approach a relay station, the scent of freshly brewed tea greets you, a mixture of smoked leaves and yak butter. You dismount, letting the horse graze as you step into the small wooden hut that serves as a resting point. Here, the station keeper offers you a steaming cup of pa-cha, the traditional salty butter tea that feels like liquid comfort. You accept gratefully, sipping the rich, creamy brew that warms your chest and steadies your nerves. This tea is more than just a drink. It's a ritual, a way to reconnect with your heritage and the land that sustains you. The subtle bitterness balanced by the buttery richness is oddly soothing. You notice how the tea seems to encourage conversation and camaraderie among travelers, bridging gaps between strangers with its simple hospitality. The relay station is a hive of quiet activity, horses being swapped, messages being handed off, and riders catching brief moments of rest. You take a few moments to stretch, rolling your shoulders and flexing your fingers before repacking your saddlebag. Food is scarce here, but the station keeper offers you a small bundle of dried apricots, soft and sweet, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, nature provides moments of sweetness. You tuck the apricots away for later, knowing that energy-rich snacks like these can make a world of difference when fatigue threatens to overtake you miles from the nearest stop. As you mount again, you think about the incredible endurance these long-distance rides require. Your diet is designed for function, yes, but also for survival. The combination of fatty dairy products, preserved meats, and the occasional fresh fruit or bread creates a nutritional balance that keeps your strength up and your mind sharp. And yet, you also know that your body is constantly adapting, making use of whatever it can find on the road. A fun bit of trivia crosses your mind. Some riders believe that chewing on the dried tendons of horses helps strengthen their own sinews and grip, an idea rooted more in superstition than science. Historians still argue whether these practices had any real physiological benefit, or if they were symbolic acts that helped riders feel more connected to their mounts and their environment. The afternoon sun climbs higher, and the terrain changes subtly from open steppe to rocky outcrops and scrubby bushes. You adjust your cloak against the increasing heat, mindful of the need to conserve energy and hydration. Water is the most precious commodity here, and finding it often means detouring off the main path to hidden wells or oases. You stop briefly at a small spring to fill your flask and wash your face, feeling the cool water revive you. As you drink, you pull out a small piece of arag, fermented mare's milk. The taste is sour and tangy, not unlike a strong yogurt, but it's packed with probiotics and nutrients that help maintain your digestive health on the rough road. It's a taste that's grown on you over time. Once a shock, now a comforting reminder of home. The Silk Roads are filled with such contrasts. Harsh landscapes and lush trade cities, simple meals and exotic spices, solitude and bustling exchanges. You think about the layers of history beneath your horse's hooves, and how your own story fits into this ancient narrative. The foods you eat aren't just fuel. They're a bridge to cultures, memories, and identities. They tell stories of resilience, adaptation, and connection. The humble bortsog, the salty butter tea, the sweet dried fruits, they're all threads woven into the fabric of the Silk Roads. As the day wanes and you prepare for the evening's rest, you unpack a small bundle of dried meat and nuts, simple, sustaining, and utterly dependable. The familiar flavors remind you that no matter how far you travel, or how many roads you cross, the essence of home travels with you. Before you settle for the night, you reflect on the importance of food, not just as survival, but as ritual, comfort, and connection. You're part of a chain stretching across continents, a link in the vast network of human stories that the Silk Roads carried for centuries. Historians still argue how much the diets of Mongol couriers vary depending on the region, season, or status, but what remains clear is that every meal, no matter how modest, played a crucial role in sustaining the empire's lifeline. You lie back, the sky turning indigo overhead, and feel the quiet pulse of the earth beneath you. The soft sounds of a distant fire, the low murmur of voices, and the rustle of night insects create a lullaby that soothes your weary mind. Tomorrow, you'll rise again to the call of the road, to meals both simple and surprising, to a life defined by movement and connection. For now, you close your eyes and let the flavors and stories of the Silk Roads carry you into rest. The dawn arrives quietly, painting the horizon with soft streaks of pink and orange. As you awaken beneath the vast steppe sky, you stretch slowly, feeling the lingering stiffness from yesterday's ride. Yet there's a quiet thrill in your chest. Another day on the Silk Roads, another chance to move forward through history's heartbeat. The morning air is cool but crisp, promising a day of travel and the chance to savor whatever provisions you have tucked away. You reach for your morning ration, a small portion of arag, fermented mare's milk, still tangy but refreshing. It's a ritual, really, an ancient elixir of the steppe, nourishing your body and spirit. The taste, a bit sour and frothy, is strangely comforting now, like an old friend who greets you each day without fail. Historians still argue whether arag was primarily a survival food or also had ceremonial significance among Mongol riders, but you feel its importance deeply as it settles in your stomach. Your pack is light, but within it is a small bundle of kormag, dried meat chunks preserved carefully in animal fat. This fatty, dense sustenance is your secret weapon against the endless hunger the road sometimes brings. The fat melts slowly on your tongue, coating it with rich, smoky flavors from the open fire where it was cured. It's a stark contrast to the lightness of the arag, but both serve you well. One invigorates, the other sustains. As you ride on, the landscape shifts subtly, jagged hills giving way to sparse groves, where wild herbs poke through the earth. You pause briefly to gather a few sprigs of what you recognize as wild thyme and licorice root, hoping to add a pinch of flavor to your next meal. Mongol mailmen often relied on such herbs to enhance their simple food, adding a touch of earthiness or a whisper of sweetness amid the monotony of dried meats and breads. There's a strange sort of poetry in the way these simple ingredients combine, isn't there? Imagine the centuries of travelers who've passed through this very spot, plucking the same herbs, brewing the same bitter teas, chewing the same tough meats. It's humbling and grounding. Among these traditions lies a curious tale you've heard whispered by fellow riders, that eating certain wild herbs could supposedly ward off evil spirits or even protect you from the cursed diseases that sometimes swept through the Silk Roads. Historians still argue whether such beliefs influenced dietary choices significantly, or were more like superstitions that eased weary minds. You think back to a time when you traded with a caravan from the distant city of Kashgar. They offered you some dried pomegranates, bright red jewels that burst with tart sweetness, and in exchange, you gave them a pouch of arag powder. The mixture of flavors on your tongue that day was unforgettable. The sweet and sour of the fruit balanced perfectly with the creamy bitterness of the fermented milk. Food on the Silk Roads was more than mere sustenance. It was a currency, a bond between people from worlds apart. This interconnectedness kept the routes alive and vibrant, and it shaped the daily lives of riders like you in ways historians are still uncovering. Your journey today leads you past a small spring where a few hardy trees cluster, an oasis of green in the otherwise arid land. You dismount and sit beneath the shade, pulling out your water skin and refilling it from the clear, cool source. The fresh water tastes like a rare gift, each sip a reminder of life's fragility on the road. You decide to prepare a quick meal. Using a small pot and a fire you build with twigs and dried grass, you boil some water and toss in a handful of dried noodles, a rare treasure you managed to barter earlier. As the noodles soften, you add a pinch of wild herbs and some salted yak butter. The aroma is simple but intoxicating, filling your senses with a warm comfort that contrasts sharply with the starkness of the journey. There's a softness to this moment, far from the hurried gallops and dusty trails. It's the kind of pause that lets you breathe in the vastness of the steppe and remember why this road matters. You nibble on your meal, savoring the interplay of textures and flavors. Chewy noodles, a salty richness, a hint of earthiness from the herbs. It's a humble feast, but one that speaks volumes about the resilience and adaptability of the Mongol riders. Their meals were never about luxury, but about practicality mixed with care. One day, a scholar riding alongside you shared a fascinating thought. The Silk Roads were not just conduits for goods, but also for culinary innovation. The exchange of ingredients, cooking methods, and recipes traveled with merchants and mailmen, slowly weaving a shared food culture across continents. For example, the introduction of noodles from China influenced diets far west, while dairy products from the steppe found their way into Persian kitchens. Historians still argue to what extent these culinary exchanges affected everyday diets versus elite or urban cuisine, but for riders like you, these innovations were practical gifts from the road. As you pack up your fire and remount, the afternoon sun now fully warming your back, you reflect on the importance of hydration. The Silk Roads could be merciless, and dehydration was a constant threat. Mongol riders developed an impressive understanding of their body's needs, often drinking small amounts of water, frequently rather than gulping large quantities at once, which could upset digestion. You sip your water carefully, mindful of this ancient wisdom. It's a small detail, but it underscores how survival on these long journeys depended on knowledge passed down through generations. Continuing along the trail, you pass grazing herds of sheep and goats tended by nomadic families. The scent of fresh wool and the faint bleating of animals blend into the symphony of the steppe. You recall how, in some parts of the empire, riders were offered fresh curds or yogurt, made from sheep's or goat's milk, as a welcome refreshment. This fermented dairy was a source of probiotics and quick energy, another piece of the nutritional puzzle. You tuck a small pouch of dried curds into your pack, a gift from a hospitable herder. It's strange how such simple foods, milk, meat, herbs, form the backbone of a complex system that fueled an empire stretching thousands of miles. The setting sun draws long shadows across the land as you near the next relay station. The smell of smoke and cooking fires carries on the breeze, promising food and rest ahead. You think about the relay system itself, the yam, which was a marvel of organization. Riders could cover incredible distances thanks to the network of stations stocked with fresh horses, food, and shelter. Some scholars still debate how centralized and efficient this system truly was, with some accounts painting a picture of near military precision, while others suggest it was more loosely organized and varied by region. Either way, it was a lifeline, and the food provided there was often a crucial reprieve for exhausted riders. At the station, you're greeted by the aroma of freshly baked bread, a welcome contrast to the usual dried rations. Bread in the Mongol context was often simple flatbreads, but sometimes traders brought more elaborate loaves infused with nuts or dried fruits. You break off a warm piece and dip it into a bowl of thick yogurt, feeling the creamy tartness balance the bread's hearty chew. It's moments like these, simple, warm, and communal, that remind you why the Silk Roads were more than just trade routes. They were places where cultures and people met, mingled, and shared their stories, their foods, their lives. As night falls, you settle beside a flickering fire, the stars now pinpricks of light in the deep velvet sky. You unwrap your last ration for the day, a handful of dried apricots and nuts, sweet and crunchy, a small celebration of endurance. You think of the meals behind and ahead, the flavors mingling in your memory like a soft melody. Each bite is a story, each ingredient a thread connecting you to countless others who traveled these same roads, centuries before and after. The wind whispers softly through the grasses, carrying the faint scent of distant spices and fresh earth. You feel the slow pull of sleep beckoning, your mind drifting gently between the past and the present. Historians still argue how much the diets of Mongol riders influenced neighboring cultures, but you know that the meals you carry and share are part of a legacy, one of survival, connection, and the quiet triumph of daily life on the move. As your eyelids grow heavy, you allow yourself a final thought. The road continues, endless and inviting, a thread woven through history and taste, stretching far beyond the horizon. And so, with the last warmth of the fire at your back, you drift off, the flavors of the Silk Roads settling softly around you. The last leg of your journey unfolds beneath a sky that shifts from the soft glow of dawn to the deep purples and blues of dusk. You're riding slower now, the miles behind you settling into a quiet rhythm in your mind. The Silk Roads have been more than just a route for trade. They've been a path of endurance, flavors, stories, and survival. As a Mongol mailman, you've carried not just messages but the shared heritage of countless cultures stitched together by food and hospitality. The memories of your meals linger, a tapestry of tastes and textures from the steppes' harsh simplicity to the rich, aromatic dishes of the cities. You recall the borts, the dried meat that saved you in the cold, the fermented mare's milk, arag and kumis, bubbling with both nourishment and tradition, the salty teas, the fragrant pilafs, and the occasional bowl of shorba that felt like home after long, lonely days. These foods were your companions, each with a story woven into the fabric of the Silk Roads. As you ride, you think about the wider significance of these foods. They were more than fuel. They were living records of the Silk Roads, complex cultural exchange. Historians still argue how much food shaped political and social connections between East and West, but you know firsthand that sharing a meal was a universal language, breaking down barriers and forging alliances. The humble ingredients you carried, dried fruits, nuts, preserved meats, were symbols of a network that stretched thousands of miles, linking empires and nomads alike. Every bite you took was part of a dialogue across continents, a delicious bridge that connected the Mongol heartlands with distant lands. You remember the marketplaces you passed, vibrant with spices, silks, and bustling voices. Food was central to these hubs of exchange, not just as trade goods, but as stories told in flavor. Whether it was the scent of cumin from Persia or the fresh sweetness of Central Asian melons, each item was a thread in a grand tapestry. You smile at the thought of traders debating over the best pilaf recipe or the finest fermented mare's milk. These debates, you realize, weren't just about taste. They were about identity, pride, and survival. Historians still debate how recipes traveled and transformed, but the evidence is in the meals you've eaten and the friendships you've formed. Night falls, and you prepare your final campfire meal. You spread out some flatbread and enjoy a handful of dried apricots and walnuts, the sweet and crunchy textures grounding you after the day's travels. The fire crackles softly, the warmth of comfort against the cool air. You take a slow sip of your last cup of tea, the smoky, salty flavor calming and familiar. As the stars emerge, you feel the weight of your journey lifting, replaced by a gentle peace. It's during these quiet moments that the stories of the Silk Roads feel closest, whispered by the wind, carried in the rustle of leaves, and in the distant howl of wolves. Food was never just about sustenance on this road. It was about connection, resilience, and hope. You realize that being a Mongol mailman meant more than speed or endurance. It meant carrying the legacy of cultures, tastes, and traditions. You lie back under the vast sky, eyes tracing the constellations your ancestors once navigated by. The scent of dried meat, sweet fruit, and salty tea mingle in your memory. These sensory echoes are a lullaby for the road-weary soul. You're filled with gratitude for the animals that sustained you, for the lands that challenged you, and for the people whose recipes and rituals nourished your body and spirit. In a world so vast and varied, these shared meals were a reminder that no matter how far you traveled, home was never just a place, but a feeling carried within. As your eyelids grow heavy, you imagine the Silk Roads continuing long after you, weaving new stories with every traveler and every meal. Historians may debate the origins of recipes or the routes of spices, but the true legacy is this. Food, like the Silk Roads themselves, connects us all, gently, across time and space. With a final deep breath, you let the night wrap around you. The gentle hum of the steppe, a soft blanket. Tomorrow holds new miles and new tastes, but for now, rest is enough. The fire's glow softens as night deepens, and you feel your body melting into the quiet earth beneath you. The vast sky above stretches endlessly, stars blinking like ancient lanterns guiding travelers long past. Your breath slows, matching the gentle pulse of the world around you. The scent of dried meat and sweet fruit drifts faintly on the cool breeze, a comforting reminder of the journey's simple sustenance. As your eyes flutter closed, the silk roads unfold like a quiet dream, a place where dusty paths met bustling markets, where meals were shared beneath countless skies, and where stories traveled as surely as horses' hoofs. The taste of salty tea, the chew of borts, and the richness of pilaf weave softly through your mind, a tapestry of connection across cultures and centuries. There is peace in knowing that every step you took, every bite you savored, was part of something greater. The Silk Roads were never just a road or a trade route. They were a living thread that linked worlds and hearts through the universal language of food and hospitality. Tonight, rest holds you gently, a silent promise that this story, and the stories you carry, will travel far beyond the stars overhead. Tomorrow will bring new horizons, new flavors, and new memories. But for now, you are wrapped in the quiet hum of the night, cradled by the past, and the promise of journeys yet to come. Sleep well, traveler. The road awaits, but tonight, the world is still,